Good evening, everybody. Thanks for coming. Welcome to your city council. My name is Paul Blackburn. I'm going to call us to order. The first thing we're all going to do is silence our cell phones, please. Secondly, we're going to remember that as we meet tonight, we are stewards of land that has been home to indigenous peoples for thousands of years. Before the recent arrival of the European heritage dominant culture, we honor this land's ancestors as we go about our business today. So this is graduation night. There's a group of residents who have participated in the first Spanish language session of Hood River 101. And we're so grateful that you came. Felicidades esta noche. Gracias por venir y gracias por participar en nuestra casa. Bienvenidos y felicidades. Tranquilo, por favor. So should I worry about the microphone as I step up and do, did we think this through? Jackie. We're going to start with Jackie.
All right, good evening, Mayor and councilors. Tonight, it is my honor to present to you the graduating class of the Fall 2024 Hood River 101 Civics Academy. We have interpretation going on, so if I take pauses in between sentences, that's why. But this group of people have been an incredible cohort. And I've been really honored to work with them over the last 6 weeks. And I can't believe it's already over. So I just have some photos and a little bit about the whole experience to share with you guys really quickly. Sorry, I'm sharing the wrong screen. There we go. Okay, so as you guys probably already know, this is the second time that we have offered this course, but the first time that we've offered it in Spanish. And I want to thank our partners over at the Next Door, including Liliana and Alicia, for working with us really closely, supporting our programming, securing a grant to help fund this program as well. Just so you guys are probably already aware, but just to reiterate, this was a 6-week program. There was one class a week. They each focused on a different department of the city. And we provided food and childcare as well. Some of the goals of this program overall has been to inform the public and bring awareness to the city, break down barriers between the public and local government, build relationships and engage in conversation with the community, and foster future community leaders, volunteers, and committee members. And in particular with this class, compared to when we offered it last year, was to make sure that it was accessible to families and our Spanish-speaking community members as well.
Jackie, that's a fantastic photo. Where is that from?
That is from the tower, the fire truck tower.
Wow.
And so those are the knobs that lift it and change direction.
Wow. Cool.
And so the way that we accomplished these goals was by providing fun, interactive classes. Here we have folks learning about roads, getting to visit a police squad car, and also getting to sit inside the fire truck. To appeal to all different kinds of learners, we made sure that this was hands-on. People got to hold different, tools that we use. They got to actually experience what it feels like to give CPR, witness different devices in action. We also got to tour our different facilities. We have here the fire station and the wastewater treatment plant. And we also incorporated games as well into the learning. We had a budget game where you use beans to kind of show where your priorities are. And we played trivia as well. And of course, we had sort of more traditional models as well, having presentations, question and answers. And we also had really meaningful conversations with the participants where they had the opportunity to tell us about their lived experiences, and we as city officials got to listen to them as well. And here's just a few more photos. So do you have any questions for me or anything that you would like to share?
Go ahead, Gladys.
Jackie and staff, thank you all so much for hosting this. Quiero darles gracias a todos ustedes por estar aquí, por su participación en las clases cívicas. Su presencia es muy importante, ya que educarnos y empoderarnos como comunidad nos permite participar en maneras más activas y efectivas. Esperamos que la información los anime a unirse a las comités para que nos dé recomendaciones al consejo. Su perspectiva es fundamental para la diversidad y la representación y asegurarnos que todas las voces en la comunidad sean escuchadas. Muchas gracias por su compromiso y por participar y por estar aquí hoy.
And I also want to make sure that we thank all of our departments who put in a lot of work to making sure the classes were informative, interesting, engaging. So thank you to all of you guys as well.
Thanks, Chief, and I think Adam's here, and yeah, appreciate y'all.
Before we start the actual graduation, I don't know if anyone from the class wanted to say any words. You're invited, but no pressure.
Please feel invited, yeah.
Buenas tardes.
Buenas tardes.
Good afternoon.
Pues, ok, muchas gracias por la oportunidad que le brindan a la comunidad, porque la comunidad está compuesta por la gente que estamos aquí y por la que están afuera y por lo que están sentados ahí también.
Thank you very much for offering this to our community, because the community is involved with very many different people.
Ok, estoy agradecido porque de esa forma creo que podemos incidir a transformar más nuestro municipio.
I'm very thankful because I think in this way we can together initiate
Para transformar más todos los campos sociales,
to
económicos,
transform the social, economic,
culturales.
cultural.
Es bueno tomar en cuenta la comunidad
It's good that to take the community in to take the community's input.
y para promover una verdadera democracia es importante incluir a todos los ámbitos de nuestra sociedad que compone a nuestro municipio.
And it's good to provide all of the inputs from all the community.
Y que sean tomadas en cuenta
And-
las opiniones, porque creo que nuestro grupo ahora
And to take our group's opinion.
sabemos más cómo
Now,
funciona el gobierno local,
now that we know how the local government works
el compromiso que tienen ustedes con nosotros
and
Y- y la responsabilidad que tenemos nosotros para que los impuestos, los servicios que brindan sean bien utilizados.
The commitment that you guys have for us and the commitment that we have for you guys is important to, ¿me lo puedes repetir otra vez? Que me larguito un poco largo.
Que los servicios que ustedes
That the
brindan
services that you guys provide
van a ser más usados,
is
más
gonna
cuidados
be more
responsablemente.
useful.
Y nosotros lo vamos a sentir más parte de la
And
comunidad.
we'll also feel like we are part of the community.
Yo creo que son líderes, somos líderes todos
I think we are
Sí.
all leaders
y podremos incidir para que
and
las
we can
decisiones de ustedes sean
start
tomadas en cuenta
that your decisions are also take our input
con la perspectiva de la comunidad de todos
with
los
the
ámbitos.
community's perspective and everyone else's.
Y creo que Hood River es gracias también a la participación de muchos inmigrantes.
And then Hood River also should thank the participation of all the community.
Para que haya este municipio reconocido a nivel nacional como uno de los bellos turísticos, también es
So
gracias
that it could be seen as a community, a beautiful community.
es gracias a la participación de toda la comunidad
Thanks to the
mexicana,
participation of
nicaragüense en mi
the
parte,
Mexican community or
Sí.
the Nicaraguan community
de otros diversos países que estamos
and
acá.
other countries.
Y es pocos países que toman en cuenta estos grupos. Yo
And
viví,
there's very little countries that take into consideration.
yo viví en Europa y la participación
I lived in Europe and the participation that
en la toma de decisiones es muy diferente.
it's very different there.
Ustedes parece que sí lo toman en cuenta y
It
gracias.
looks like you guys do
Sí.
take
Sí.
that into consideration.
Muchas gracias y creo que estamos capacitados para poder venir a participar en los consejos
Thank you, and I think we are now equipped to come and participate.
y poder incidir en los planes de 1 año, de 4 años del
And
municipio.
that we can have input in the 1-year plan, 2-year plans, or,
Ok, muchas gracias.
thank you very much.
Okay, hi. I'm gonna say in English and I don't know if you want to translate, is that okay? No, I'm just gonna say in English. So I'm gonna say it in English, but if you want to translate for that. Yeah. Okay. My name is Cindy Hernandez. I am a licensed clinical social worker here in our community. And I just wanted to say thank you. I think we definitely met the goals of the class. Personally, I feel like I just learned a lot more than I had ever really thought about because I get stuck in focusing my career and profession. And I think we all do just gonna to go about our routines. And so we don't stop to think about what's going on beyond like our home, right? Like in the community. So I think it's been a lot of like knowledge gained and a really good experience to like share this with the Spanish speaking community. Even though I'm bilingual, like I had a lot of fun with them and it was really awesome to see everybody just gain so much knowledge and just motivate us to like be more involved and be more participating in the community. And so just want to say thank you to all the different departments. It was a lot of fun and yeah, thank you.
Hi, my name is Gabby and I've been a resident for Hood River for the last 20 years. And this is the first time I'm actually being this close to be part of the city and what really involves our city and the decisions that we're making behind it. And just by taking this class, it was just such a great experience to understand all the decisions, but also how all of our departments work and how they work for our community. And feels like sometimes we kind of fall into these complaints about things that are happening in the community without having a background and understanding why the decisions are made. And just by taking this class, I've been able to learn so much but I've been able also already like talk to my friends and families about things and I'm like, well, you know what, hold on, this is why decisions are made, this is the direction they're taking, and just being that voice. So I hope, and very thankful to everybody, Abigail, Jackie, and everybody that, teaches each week something different, that, I hope, more people gets involved in these classes and learn about our city and how it works. And thank you so much. Yeah, it was great. Thank you. Um, Hi, I'm Sylvia. I just wanna, Cindy and Gabby took the words that I wanted to say too. I'm also very thankful and for the opportunity. I feel like this was a great class to be a part of, and I'm very happy that Hood River does classes like this so that we can learn, because like Gabby said, not a lot of us know how this works. Like, for example, what I learned the last class, like I didn't realize in why some of the orchards were being turned down to make space, but last class I realized like, oh, okay, it makes sense. Like instead of being sad about it, it's like now it's like, oh, okay, it makes sense why we need all this. So this class really taught me a lot and I'm very thankful, and yeah, thank you so much for inviting us and for having us, and we really learned a lot.
Okay, come on up. How are we doing? Can you hear me?
Thank you, Mike.
All right, I'm gonna do my best on this microphone. Oh, when we got that. Yeah. Come around here, will you, guys?
You taking pictures?
We didn't rehearse. Carmen? Maria Elena. Sylvia. Cindy. Say. Jesus. Gabby. And Yolanda. All right, Jackie, how do we do this?
Maybe everyone stands in front of the dais. We're trying to get like half of the group on this side. All right.
Cheese.
Get them. Yeah. Other one. Okay, 1, 2, 3.
Okay.
Thank you.
Muchas gracias, Jackie.
Fuiste muy atenta.
Okay, that was fun. Thanks, everybody. We are now going to recess the city council meeting to pursue the urban renewal agenda, and I'll hand the gavel over to Chair Zandmiller.
Hello, everybody. Calling to order the urban renewal meeting for October 28th and the first. Bye-bye. First thing we're gonna do is move the furniture around so we can all play musical chairs or some such thing. So. Can people on Zoom hear us now?
Exactly. Question on my candidates here.
That's better.
All right, we got Travis and Heather, is that right?
Correct.
Right, sweet. I think let's go around the room. Do introductions real quick, because we don't do this very often, and so seems like a good thing.
Mayor Blackburn, I am a member of the Urban Renewal Agency Board.
Ben Mitchell, City Councilor. Jack Trumbull, Chair of Urban Renewal Advisory Council.
Clint Harris, also on the advisory council.
Amanda Gagey, I guess I'm co-vice chair of the advisory.
Doug Stepina, City Council, Urban Renewal Advisory Board member.
Megan Saunders, City Council, and I think the Vice Chair of the Urban Renewal Board.
Greg Olson, City Council.
Gladys Rivera, City Council and Urban Renewal.
Kate Hoffman, Advisory Committee.
Then Heather?
Hi, I'm Heather Garing. I'm a commissioner for the Port of Hood River and assigned to Urban Renewal.
And Travis?
Travis Dillard Advisory Committee.
Sweet. I don't think is there anyone looking forward to speak to the joint session here, Jen? Okay, hearing none. I think we're just off to the races and introduce Will and what he's been up to.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm very excited today to present the housing constructability analysis for the west side, along with Becky Hewitt from Echo Northwest is the project director who put the report and analysis together, along with Scott Goodman at Echo. So I'm going to, without further ado, share the screen. Get into the constructability analysis. I'm going to kick us off by going through some of the West Side District's context, background, and then queuing up the question that Echo Northwest is going to help us answer, which is why is housing not being built, or at least not enough housing being built in the structure of the constructability analysis that they have put together, how it's constructed, and what the policy implications are. So to kind of orient us and place that, this constructability analysis is part of our 5-year action plan that we started at the beginning of this calendar year. And it has included creating an engagement plan, putting together a middle income construction incentive, and setting our performance and equity metrics that the advisory committee just looked at a first draft of at their last meeting. So that combined with this, that work combined with this constructability analysis is all pointing towards our project sequencing and investment prioritization that we're going to set to guide the first several years of this brand new West Side District. So I wanted to start with looking at start the discussion with context of our housing production numbers here in the city. So this is the number of new housing units permitted in Hood River, as well as the boundaries of the West Side District, which extend a little bit outside of the city limits. And so through the 2010s, we were hovering at about 40 to 60 new housing units per year. And that's primarily when Cedar Crop was really getting built. Contributed to a bunch of those numbers. But in the late 2010s, around 2018, we started to decline, and then there was a bump in 2021 and 2022. But that's the Leeward Apartments and the Adams Creek co-housing. So absent those two developments, it really has been a steady downward trend in our housing production numbers. And even back in the 2010s, no one thought that our housing production numbers were adequate. But looking at them in the context of what the Department of Land and Conservation, or Land Conservation Development Department has for a target of our housing production numbers, we should be closer to about 112 units produced per year to keep up with the governor's plan for statewide housing production goals. So 112 is our assigned number here in Hood River's UGB. And as housing production has declined, we've seen unaffordability increase. So that orange line is the median home price in Hood River compared to the median household income. And it reached a low in 2012 of about 5 to 1. And for the most recent year available, just 2022, we've gone up to a ratio of 10 to 1. So housing price to household income. As we look to where could be the next potential place to address our housing production problems, the obvious location is over at the west side. That is our last remaining reserve of a significant amount of developable land that isn't actively being farmed at this time. So approximately 240 acres, either vacant or underdeveloped. But when we look at this potential for significant amount of housing. And versus what has actually been built on the west side, over the last 10 years, only 7% of our new housing has been built in the bounds of our West Side Urban Renewal District. So obviously, something's wrong. Something's a barrier to producing the housing that we have all identified as a critical need. And so one known issue is lack of infrastructure. This is some of the major transportation system plan identified projects over on the west side that need to be created, and some of the significant dollar amounts associated with them. So Mount Adams intersection estimated to be about $7.4 million for a roundabout. Alignment D, which would be the new major north-south road with water sewer storm included, is about $25 million. Sherman Avenue extension, $17 million. Connecting Wine Country, $2.8 million. And then Mount Adams extension, another 3.1. So those are all costs that are borne by new development, either in the form of SDCs or specifically as a requirement for their land use approval or building permit. So we know infrastructure costs are a significant barrier, but we also know that there's a myriad of other issues that impact what gets built and how much of it gets built. So in addition to infrastructure costs, we have construction costs, development fees, land pricing, zoning, which dictates what can be built. There's the free market of what dwelling units will sell at or will rent for. Financing costs, and then finally there's developers' risk reward for taking on these projects and building these homes. So this to tie all of this together, we asked Echo Northwest to basically model the development potential of the west side using information that they had and also interviews with developers to help fill in this picture. And so with that, I will stop sharing my screen and hand over to Becky Hewitt, who will take it over with her screen.
Hi all, thanks for having me. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Great. Okay. So we'll explain kind of what our mission was. Our role was to help provide kind of a developer's perspective, but not a developer who owns land or has active development in Hood River, but a neutral third-party development informed analysis. So we're looking at things in a similar way to how a developer would, using a pro forma analysis. That's just a way of looking at how you expect a potential development to perform. And it takes into consideration construction costs, both labor and materials, other development costs, fees, design, legal, et cetera, what the ultimate value of the end product will be, the financing terms, and then land and infrastructure costs. Our analysis uses a little bit, kind of flips the standard equation on its head a little bit. We use something called residual land value, and that allows us to kind of compare things across, compare different types of development that might have different return metrics and allow us to see how they would compete for land and how that might inform their ability to pay for infrastructure and their ability to pay for land. So residual land value just is a maximum amount that a developer can pay for land. It is what is left after they have accounted for their construction costs and other soft costs relative to the value of the development. So for this analysis, we looked at the urban renewal area broken into 7 different sub areas. We estimated the development potential in each area based on the zoning and buildable lands. And based on the zoning, we estimated what mix and density of different housing could be built. and then worked with Will to summarize the infrastructure costs to these different sub areas, considering both things like local streets, local water and sewer lines, and those bigger projects that Will was talking about. So we call these prototypes. These are example developments. They're not, they may resemble real developments, but they are sort of generalized versions of development. You can think of these as inspired by a true story of development in Hood River, but not a literal development from Hood River. So we looked at single unit detached, middle housing, and apartments, and we connected those to the different zones that are in the area, looking at what could be built in R1 versus R2 versus R3. And then we looked at market data and estimated what we thought these example development types, prototypes, would sell for in Hood River's market. The tiny little font on the bottom has some details about how big we assumed the unit was and on what size of lot it would be. But you can see that there's a range of those estimated sales prices from about $500,000 for some of the smaller units. This is a little over 1,000 square feet, to over $1 million for a pretty large detached unit, more like 2,800 square feet. And there's a whole range in between, depending on unit size, whether it's attached or detached, and what density it's at. The small apartment, this is not assuming it would be for sale as a condo. This is just looking at what would the value be to an investor if they were to purchase those units and rent them out. So we're going to kind of break down that sale price to see how much of that goes into all the different costs and then what's left that could pay for land and infrastructure. So I'm not going to read off all the numbers, but just what you'll see is how the sales price gets sort of consumed by different things at different paces for the different types of housing. So this is the hard cost, that's the labor and materials. And then we add in soft costs, so that includes system development charges, it includes permit fees, and then we've got other soft costs in there, design, architecture, permitting, as well as sales commissions on the for sale units. Then if we add in the local infrastructure costs, so this would be like your local street, your water and sewer lines that are in that street. When we think about how much local infrastructure we would need per unit based on, how wide are those lots typically and that kind of thing, that gives us a sense of how much cost gets added for local infrastructure. And then the developer required returns. This is not an exorbitantly high percentage. This is a pretty standard percentage. This is, we've heard a whole range from developers, and this is, I would say, kind of in the lower end of the ballpark that we hear in terms of what developers target for their return, because things don't always go to plan. And so this little kind of yellowish sliver is what's left for the combination of land and any contributions that development would have to make to offsite project costs. You can tell for the small apartment, there is a barely visible skinny little bar right here. Whereas for the large detached home, there's a decent chunk left that could go towards land and offsites. So that's really, that's one of the key things that drives the rest of our results is how much different types of housing can afford to spend on their land and their offsite costs. The thing to remember here is these are on different sizes of lots. They're at different densities. So one might think, well, okay, sure, the apartments, they don't have a lot on a per unit basis, but they've got a lot more units per acre. They should, if you add that all together, it should even it out a bit. It does even it out a bit, but this is showing even after you account for differences in density, how big is the gap between what the small apartment can afford to pay and what each of these can afford to pay for land. So even after accounting for density, your large single detached homes are still able to pay something like $18,000 more per unit for land. And so that's going to make it pretty hard for those apartments to be able to compete to acquire property, and it's likely to need financial support. And part of the reason for that is that you've got kind of, your housing market is kind of two markets. You've got a for sale market where people are able to bring their home equity or other accumulated wealth to potentially be able to spend more on a home. You've got some demand from folks that are looking for a second home, that are willing to pay more for the pretty impressive scenic and recreational amenities that Hood River has to offer. The rental market, in contrast, that affordability is really just tied to income. And your renters are more likely to be folks that are full-time in the community. And so that means they're more likely to have their wages, their income tied to the local economy. And so that's got potentially some young professionals, but then also service industry workers. And those wages are not really very high. And that makes it hard for those rents to really push up into levels that would be able to support higher cost of construction and higher land costs. And so when we put the results together and we look at these different sub areas, the map is down here again, just for reference. This is showing you on a per acre basis, per gross acre, about what the sort of light green shading here, this is about the range of what we've seen for land transactions in Hood River. So the very bottom end of this range, this is like, yeah, maybe one time land sold for that cheap is down here in the mid 200s. Up here in the, $500,000, $600,000 per acre, that's a little bit more, if you could afford that much, you'd have more choices. The average of the ones we saw was somewhere in the middle right here. So what this is showing, these dark green bars, are how much the development in aggregate in these sub areas, given the sort of mix of different housing types that's allowed in their zoning, what they could potentially afford for land. So you can see that sub area 2, 4, 5, 6, and 7, that's these ones that have more of the lighter yellow, the lower density zoning. Those ones are closer, especially before you're accounting for offsite costs. Those are kind of in the ballpark of what land has been trading for in Hood River. So that means that if they didn't have to pay for offsite costs, development in those areas is probably kind of about where it would need to be able to pay for land, give or take. If you load in the offsites, though, then you end up with these orange bars. So this is after if you assume a proportional contribution to all those different projects that Will talked about, then you drop this down. And you can see that some of the areas get hit harder than others because some of them have more of that major infrastructure in them than others. So with those offsites accounted for, it really puts most of these areas kind of at the very bottom end of that range of where they could plausibly acquire, a developer could plausibly acquire land, reach a negotiated agreement with a property owner. And you can see that sub areas 1 and 3, which are the ones, those are zoned for commercial and industrial. And so we're looking at just an assumed residential component of that. But those are the hardest hit because the residential that would be allowed in those areas is primarily multifamily. Multifamily has all the challenges that we mentioned. And they also have some pretty heavy offsite infrastructure costs because this is where some of those big projects are that Will mentioned. So I'm going to unshare and we can take any questions that you folks have.
Where's the good news?
Yeah.
Not that I ever read anything about Hood River housing and don't get depressed about it, but especially being a renter, that was certainly, I felt that way reading that report.
What do we got, Paul?
Is the therefore that no one will build?
I don't think you're in a situation where no one can build anything. I think you're in a situation where, and I think this is what you've been seeing, where the thing that's possible is some single detached and some middle housing. If you can find a site that doesn't trigger too much too much extraordinary infrastructure costs. So if you can kind of just like extend things just a little bit, you can kind of like incrementally build into it. But I would say that being able to take down some of those bigger pieces that have those bigger infrastructure costs, I think the great news is y'all have an urban renewal district. Y'all have tools. You have the ability to provide incentives. You have the ability to invest in infrastructure. So you have options that are not available to all communities that are in this situation. This situation is not unique or uniquely terrible. There are a lot of communities where greenfield development is, and this isn't completely greenfield development, but where development that requires extending out infrastructure is challenging. There are a number of communities just, put those infrastructure costs kind of back on development. And in some cases, the development can handle that. Again, I think you're maybe some kinds of development could handle it. But you might not get the density and mix of housing types that you are looking for out of this area. So I don't think it's quite a nobody will do anything, but I think if you stay the course, you'll see maybe sort of continued incremental development at lower densities until somebody is able to put something together for those bigger sites and reach some kind of agreement about paying for those bigger infrastructure components.
Thank you.
Megan.
I guess both Becky and Will, in your analysis, did this already assume that what we were planning to fund with urban renewal was already funded, or is the offsites that you calculated in there, does that not include the money we were already planning to spend? Like, I guess is the conclusion that we need to somehow come up with even more than what urban renewal has, or is that gonna make a chunk of that issue go away?
No, Councilor Saunders, this did not include any assumptions of how West Side District money would be spent. So yes, that is dry powder to apply to these problems.
Thank you.
Becky and Will, thanks for doing this. There was mention of, this is an urban renewal. So how are we leveraging state and federal housing support, such as the Oregon Housing and Community Services, the state tax financing, the federal low-income housing tax credits? Are we eligible for Senate Bill 1537 that allows for a one-time augmentation of 300 acres? Like, what are the other solutions that are coming at a state and federal level that will support more housing? I just returned from the League of Oregon Cities, where Bend is building 3,400 units of affordable housing. So I've seen it be possible. How do we replicate some of those and again leverage our state and federal support?
I can take a first crack at that, and then Becky, any ideas are welcome. So first is doing, we want to do 780 Rand Road over again and over again and over again. Because we put about $1 million into buying the land. No, actually quite a bit less than that. And now that has leveraged $15 million from the state in a grant and about $35 million in expected LIHTC tax increment. So that is a huge leverage. So we want to do that. We want to replicate it as soon as possible. for, I think it's, the expansion of urban growth boundary is difficult for us here because of the scenic area, so we can't really take advantage of that. There is another program in SB 1537, I believe it is, that has a middle income housing revolving loan fund. I've been on, that is still very early in them rolling that out. But I'm tracking that, but it is essentially what we've already done with our middle income housing construction incentive. So we're getting out ahead of the state on that front. Becky, I don't know if you have any other just kind of tools that we should be thinking about.
I think, well, just to add on to what you said, I think the state is paying more attention to the need to fund infrastructure to support housing than they have in my career. I've been working on similar projects for 10 years now, and it was always like, okay, well, how are we going to close the gap based, using different development derived funding tools? That was always the question. And now it's more of a mix of, are any of these projects things that might be compelling for funding from the state? And there also might be things that you could do to spread some of these costs across development more. I mean, that's what a sort of localized system development charge does, is it just spreads the cost across all the development instead of putting it on whoever has to build that piece of infrastructure. And so there's maybe potential for some additional localized cost sharing tools and potentially some state funding. Maybe a few of these could be at a level that would be competitive for federal grants as well. But I think you've got some bigger projects in here that might be worth trying to seek out outside funding for. And then for some of the medium-sized ones, you might be able to kind of spread them a little bit better across the different developments so that they would be less burdensome on any given development.
I'll add on to that just for the local context of what Becky's talking about. That's basically proportionate share districts, and we have experience doing that with Cascade and Rand had a proportionate share district, and so did Second and Oak. And so that's the mechanism that and how we've used it in Hood River to spread out what is a significant capital investment over a wider area.
I have a question. So we've historically talked about waiting till a development opportunity comes up and then sort of playing the game of, who's going to pay for the infrastructure and what tools do we have? Does this say that we should actually go build infrastructure and then that will attract? Does it change which car of the train goes first? I guess does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can take a first crack at that, and Becky, let me know if you have a different opinion. I think one of my main takeaways from this is just knowing that we will need to come to the table with infrastructure help when a developer is proposing. That the numbers seem pretty clear that, particularly for that district-wide infrastructure, that's not going to be able to be placed on the pro forma of anything less than large single-family homes. So if we expect other housing product to be built, I think the key takeaway here is just level setting that the urban renewal district will need to come in and play a role and possibly relieve that offsite infrastructure cost off of the development. Okay, you have a...
Yeah, no, I would agree. I would just say that it's not necessarily a question of building things like far in advance of development, but trying to pick off the things that are critical path for the largest number of different developments, and where maybe it solves a problem for one developer now, but then it also solves problems for other developers down the road, so to speak, maybe literally, maybe figuratively. So it's getting maybe not way out ahead of everyone, but being willing to partner to make those first big moves possible. You've got a couple of big properties out here, bigger properties. If you get someone with deep pockets, sometimes they're able to front load some costs and have a reimbursement arrangement over time, or have some kind of public-private partnership where they're able to share in the cost and the risk. And so the city might not have to do all of the work up front, but I think identifying those projects that are inhibiting more than just a single property, but are inhibiting multiple developments within this area and working on those.
In answer to your question, you may not even know this, but it was 8 or 10 months ago, our little advisory council was presented to by a landowner who wished to sell to a developer from Portland, who was passing on the message through the landowner to get our butts in gear and get this new district formed so that they could purchase the land and develop, thinking that we would invest some of this urban growth money into the infrastructure. So, I mean, that's looking way ahead. It was kind of out of time, that presentation, whether they understood that or not, but their developers are out there looking, so.
Agreed.
And developers aren't gonna be shy about what do they
No.
need, right?
No.
So. Oh.
I have this nagging feeling that it could end up that we invest this money, the people's money, the public's money. And the result is somebody who happens to own a parcel of land in the West Side District suddenly makes more money when they sell it. And that doesn't feel like exactly what we're hoping.
I would agree, but it is an answer.
Partly related to that, actually. So as we've been talking about different incentives, via SDCs, for example, is there a way to take some of what you're doing with the programs now that we have this data to kind of show us what the impact would be for different types of housing? Because I feel like, to your point, and also to your point earlier, Megan, I think that you know, that now that we have this, we see what the impact is, right? And we can focus and see if things that we're doing like scaling and, you know, potential reimbursements could move the needle enough, and also where not to do it. But to that point, you know, where is that achievable in terms of the land that we have? You're right. So, you know, it was just mentioned that we have some very big swaths of land that are owned by, you know, 1 or 2 individuals, perhaps, right? So how much buildable land is that of the mix?
Well, I think there's a couple questions in there.
Yeah, there are. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So as far as how this connects with our middle income housing construction, you know, Becky showed in there that small apartments have about an $18,000 per unit disadvantage as compared to large family homes. So that's nice for us to kind of know at least what the ballpark is. Are estimated for cottage clusters, we're going to be the most benefited by the middle income housing construction, and they would get about $15,000 worth of bonus, worth of incentive. So I think luckily we got maybe 2/3 of the way there, but this might inform that, yes, maybe we need to ratchet it up just a little bit more, so that we truly make developers indifferent about building that large home versus a small home. And also as far as constructing incentives, or layering on shared costs for the infrastructure, if we can put those costs onto larger homes, then it hopefully will not impact the underlying land value. So to the mayor's comment, because the land value right now is being determined by the best and highest, most expensive use, it's being determined by those large family homes. So we can make those large family homes less profitable while making the middle income homes more profitable. It should have no net impact on the land transaction price if we, you know, calibrate it correctly. Did I answer every piece here?
Yeah, I think that, I mean, And then I guess just, is there an understanding of what is developable and how many owners there are, that sort of analysis?
Oh, yes, absolutely, yeah, so obviously Von Floto's own quite a number of parcels out there, but that's not the whole universe of land. The school district is also a major landowner out there. And maybe owns significantly more land than they're gonna need for a future school, so I do see that as already publicly owned land, right? One of the strategies is land banking. Well, luckily the school district did that 10 years ago when they bought it. So I think they are gonna be a key partner as well as unlocking the west side, particularly because their parcel is also at the intersection of the Sherman extension and where alignment D could come together. So in many ways, that could be kind of like a keystone.
Thank you.
I don't quite see it yet. How do we prevent the developer from saying, oh, you put in this sewer, thank you very much, I'll take that and build my McMansions?
Proportionate share district. That's what Becky was talking about before, or a reimbursement district or a local improvement district. That is a way to say everyone who generates X number of trips is gonna pay this much money, and so now you've made it kind of on net more expensive for everyone to build, which should increase land prices. But if you hold harmless your middle housing, that's hopefully how you've now equalized without the money rolling to the residual land value.
Thank you.
Do we know enough to say if we did alignment D and the Mount Adams interchange, which does seem like the big pieces, can we go back through the math and say how much did we just help each of these things, or is it still? Does that make sense?
Becky, you want to take that one?
Sure, yeah. I don't think I could do it on the fly for you right now, but yes, we do have those costs kind of identified separately, and we could kind of look at how much do individual projects contribute to or how much do they take away from that residual land value. And if I could, I just had a quick note on the previous question about preventing the developer from just sort of taking the infrastructure and building what they want. Just one other note on that is that if you do use development agreements to build, especially the bigger projects, that gives you more leverage to say specifically what each party is going to do and to potentially specify what kind of housing is going to get built on the site that you are providing infrastructure to serve or that you're contributing to the infrastructure for.
I think Travis has that.
Grant, and then Travis. Travis, you can jump in anytime you want, probably. But
I was just curious on your estimated pricing on Exhibit 5 for the attached middle housing. So it seems like the sweet spot is the attached middle housing in the R1 zone. Is the 675 or the 625, are those middle of the road builds? Are those higher end builds? Because it seems to me it seems if I'm a developer, I'm going to make a lot more money building those and selling. I'm going to get a lot more volume on a piece of land. And I'm just wondering, does that fit because I noticed somewhere in the document was talking about that starting, but it's higher end, more luxury homes, because there's townhouses like on Oak Street that are going for $1 million. So is that sort of like a B class type build when you guys assess those values?
That's a great question. So there is a big range, as you noted, in sale prices. And so we tried to kind of limit the variables, if you will, on middle housing and assume that they are generally, in sort of like a I mean, it's all relative. I'm thinking like middle of the road in terms of like kind of
Finishes.
quality,
Yeah.
finishes, things like that. But
Mhm.
but middle of the road varies in different markets.
Well,
But I would say they're not the top of Hood River. We're not assuming the top of Hood River's market, because to your point, that would be closer to like $1 million. And the costs would be much higher. They're not the cheapest, the lowest price point that we've seen, out of new construction. They're kind of in the middle, and we tried to kind of true up their construction costs accordingly for that kind of, let's say, middle to upper middle finish level.
If I was equating it to like apartments, it'd be like a B-class apartment building or B+-ish, and not like, and so it seems to me, and I don't know what the mechanism is, but it seems to me that's going to be the most bang for your buck for everybody, for developers as well as the city, because that's where I'm just looking at that as a developer going, well, that's where I would want to buy a piece of land. So incenting the attached middle housing, I'm assuming it's R1 is the sweet spot just because there's just more R1 zoning. But, if you can get the R2 is great. I mean, if you can get 29 people, because people are still going to get home ownership with that, and people are going to see it as home ownership because they're going to buy something that can appreciate on a market comp approach, and they can see that as an investment in their future. So I'm just saying the attached middle housing, that seems to be the sweet spot. And that's even better than cluster cottage. I didn't quite understand why you're saying cluster cottage was better, because it seems to me that's where everybody's going to win or get more of a win with the attached middle housing projects.
I think this is a little bit just the limitations of picking, 8 examples out of 80 that you could build in this area at different price points and sizes and configurations and densities. But I guess what stood out for us is that given the strength of the for sale market, some of the middle housing is able to push the top end of your price range, even with relatively small unit sizes, even with attached units. And so to the extent that you can do that, that comes out pretty strong, because then you're getting pricing that's closer to the detached homes, but at a density that's much higher. I think there's, we didn't want to make that the one example of middle housing, because not everything is hitting that very top price point. So we kind of put it at a more like middle range. And I think at that middle range, things do pretty well, but when we look at that, the big detached homes end up looking better because they're only luxury, that we're only modeling those as a luxury. We're not modeling a middle of the road 2,800 square foot detached home. We're only modeling that as a big expensive home. And so to some extent, many of these housing types could, if they have a good view, if they have the right amenities, if they have a good location, they could potentially push that price range. And between the different middle housing types, I think generally we see that detached tends to get a premium over attached, but you can sometimes pack the attached in more tightly and potentially achieve a higher density. So those can be kind of offsetting. So I would say for the middle housing, I think it's going to be kind of in the details of the different like densities and unit sizes and finish levels that you can get to. And I wouldn't expect there to be sort of like one type or form of middle housing that's the hands down winner every time. I think you're going to see some mix, partly just to offer a range of options to the market, so you don't kind of saturate any one thing. And so there are different sizes and different styles.
That makes sense.
Great. Related question, especially in subgroups 2, 4, 5, 6, and 7, it's a lot of R1 zoning. in your analysis, were you scoped just to do being held to that zoning? Or did you explore the concept of potentially the consequences of changing that zoning?
So we held the zoning constant, but I would say that there are some observations that one could make about the zoning and how that affects feasibility. I think
What
the
are those
R2,
observations, please?
I would say the R2 gives you a wider range of options. And because like we were just talking about the middle housing, I think having more options for how you configure the middle housing and the density of the middle housing without really sacrificing feasibility too much relative to kind of a medium-sized detached home, I think that's good. The R3, because that pushes you more into multifamily, that really created challenges for feasibility. So because the R3 doesn't really allow for a blend of those other housing types, at that point, density becomes no longer an asset to feasibility. But at R2, I think you've got a lot of choices, and you can mix in the detached, you can mix in various densities of middle housing, and I think that provides a lot of flexibility.
Sure, thanks. And then a follow-up to that, this study relates to infrastructure cost, building cost, to establish the roads, build the units themselves. And it was limited to not include ongoing maintenance costs, correct? Okay, so the decisions, correct me if I'm wrong, but a consequence of the zoning and how this area is built out will affect our ongoing maintenance, our ongoing budget, our ongoing operations of the city, and how much it's going to cost us long-term, right?
Yes.
Thank you. So just something to keep in mind when evaluating the various zones and the possibilities that lie therein. Thanks.
But if you get more R2 zoning and you can do the detached or the attached middle housing, you're going to get a higher assessed tax value, right? So you're going to maybe compensate for that with revenue. I mean, I understand what you're saying. I was just thinking if you get more units and you're selling at higher price points, you have more value. There's more revenue to pay for those additional expenses. Am I thinking about that right? I'm kind of a neophyte when it comes to zoning. I don't understand why things are zoned one way or another when it comes to building. Or I don't understand why something's R1 versus R2.
History.
What's that?
I said history. Are there policy decisions? I mean, we as a group have said middle housing is where we want to incent people. Is any of this discussion changing how? Does this information give us either question of that, that decision, or should we refine it somehow moving forward, just from a policy perspective?
Slightly, if you don't mind, slightly related as to why I asked the zoning question, just going through the economic models of things, and Becky maybe alluded to it earlier and can fill in. The economic incentives of large single family residences and the zoning we have laid out incent large single family residences throughout those zones that I mentioned most readily. So if we do nothing, we can expect that kind of development throughout those zones in particular as a natural consequence. Am I prognosticating correctly, Becky, in your professional opinion?
I would say that you have a lot of built-in incentives for large, expensive detached homes as things stand right now. And you have, nothing in your zoning that would preclude or limit them.
Does that answer your question?
I think so. I always had a hope that if we allowed all the density in R1 as well as R2, that we could incent development to be the different form, but I think the counter argument here is like, if you can build a big house, you're gonna build a big house, cause it's what's most profitable, so, Paul.
Travis, I appreciate your neophyte eyes. I would argue that zoning used to be to prevent density. Right?
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying, like. the sweet
We don't
spot's
want them
R2.
apartments up in my house, right? Now, we're totally trying to do something different. We're trying to incentivize density. So it's a big, big change.
That goes right back to Becky saying you have tools, because we have lots of knobs on all these things that we can dial up and down, and we have the control of that, and we have the support to use them correctly and with guidance and help and good, thinking about it. I've been trying to take a step sideways through this and think like, what does it look like if we met that 112 dotted line in town? What does living during that time look like? Can I drive through town still? Can I get to the lumberyard in less than 3 hours? Do I have 30 applicants for 2 spaces or back to 1 for 2 spaces at my business? Like what does that feel like? And it's so maybe there's your, what's the good news? Maybe it's that this takes a long time is the good news, because if we could drastically go from 10% or 15% of what we might be achieving for the governor to hit it, say in 2 years, might not be tolerable. Yeah. Might not be possible.
I'm gonna counter that and say for everyone who is struggling to live here or has moved away, it would be very tolerable to potentially actually have a place to live that they could afford.
And for people investing from out of town, say coming in to be new businesses and compete, great. Lots of places, lots of employees, right? So.
Well, in terms of getting around town, I don't know about all you, I don't have any problem getting around town in the winter, the fall, or the spring. The time that I have a hard time getting around town is the summer, and I don't think that's necessarily because of residents. So I'm in agreement with Megan on that point, personally. I understand what you're saying.
But you can make really nice looking communities with the attached middle housing, like with amenities and playgrounds for the kids. And like, I don't think it's just needs to be a bunch of ugly boxes either. But it seems to me the sweet spot's the R2 zoning with the middle housing, either detached or connected.
Jack.
I'm curious. It feels like there's a larger opportunity to change R1 to R2 as opposed to just plugging in infrastructure out of the gates. That changing zoning would encourage development, and part of that question is I'm curious what Bend did. Gladys, you mentioned the housing that Bend is putting in. Did they develop on the outskirts of the city? Is it R2 or what? Or is it large apartment complexes,
It's a mix of all of that. So the good thing is I have contact information. I'm going to share that with Abigail and Dustin so that they can get together and discuss, because it did take a very special developer to also come into the mix, and they have a lot of money and they've done this throughout the state. So they're not new to this. The city of Bend has a lot of staff to also support developers from beginning to end. So it's a little different than what we have here. And they're also, not limited by some of the national scenic area that they have out on there, but they're making it happen. So I'll definitely pass on contact information so that Abigail and Dustin and Will can continue to follow up and learn. A lot of the House bills that they've taken advantage of also stem from 2016. So this is a long time in the making for them to finally start breaking ground and, developing thousands of units of affordable housing. It's really cool. Maybe really hopeful.
Becky, to Jack's point, does changing zoning to R2, would that actually incent development, or does it just fight back against a particular kind of development? I was thinking it was the latter, but are there incentives inherent in down zoning, up zoning, whatever is zoning?
I would say that changing to R2 So some of the middle housing was a little bit more feasible at a higher density. It's a little bit of a mixed bag on a per acre basis. But it definitely does provide more options. And the other thing, if you think about, there's both like the feasibility of the different housing types that are allowed. And then the other thing that changes when you change the density is when you have a fixed cost for a big offsite project and you are spreading that across a larger number of units, that the cost that you would need to get from each unit goes down. So it can be helpful in terms of providing a wider range of options, but it can also be helpful because everybody doesn't have to chip in as much. You don't have to get as much from every unit to pay for some of those bigger projects. And I see we might have an expert in the room who is going to chime in on zoning as well.
I was just going to see what you all said. Standing here judging you all. Always. I think the idea of this R2 change, it goes both ways. You know, if you do have a developer that intends to build at a greater density, you can spread that flat cost across that unit cost. What we see and what we grapple with on and what you'll hear me say, and you probably heard me say again, it's a speculative rezone, doesn't necessarily guarantee that developer comes in. We see land costs, and this is a great area for speculation. This is a wonderful speculation area. So what happens when you preemptively rezone, and you'll see me, and you'll hear me say this again, is oftentimes the speculation value goes up. So your residual land value may be in a certain area, but all of a sudden this property was once R1 and I felt upset that I had to, do lots, and it went to R3, and now all of a sudden I'm going to sell it R3. Regardless, like now my potential yield goes way up, so my value in ask goes up. Not that I'm gonna, and actually can flip the economics upside down, because now the land value goes up on speculation. Now I'm forced to put a home builder or a developer in a position where now they really got to go to R1. Now they're really got to be pressed to that highest and very inelastic housing type that people, once you're at 1.1 million, who cares if we go to 1.3 million? But that becomes a product that starts to pencil if we have mass speculation, and we have lots of speculation here. So I'm always careful about this speculative rezone, and I'm always careful about expectations of once you own it, doesn't matter. C2, you can build mixed use multifamily, you can build a KFC. You put in infrastructure that supports one, you may not be able to differentiate those two, even though you have this affordable housing task. The same, the roads and the pipes are often agnostic to the uses that you get to. So you got to be really careful about that investment. I fully believe in the development agreement and development deals. When you start getting projects that start filling a common good, a mission that you're driven for, it becomes investment time for money. So you will see me typically hold fast on speculative rezones, to not press that up, and to be more willing to look at a project by project base. And developers I talk to too, when they come to me, I'll speak with them and say, what's the project? You want to go from R1 to R3? Okay, that's great. What's the product? What are we getting out of this? What do you intend to do? And does it move the needle? Does it fulfill the mission? Does it provide more affordable or more units? Or are we simply going to put more larger inaccessible housing that's on there? That's what we talk about. That's what exactly 101. Changing to R2, not going to change the game. You could get more inaccessible houses.
I like the idea of making it.
Pretty soon, but I want to get to you guys real quick.
Okay. Well, I guess there's a few things. Way back, you said our goal was getting more middle housing, and I think I just want to say, like, my policy goal is middle housing, apartments, condos, like anything that is denser and smaller,
Right.
more. Like as we saw in the graph, the deficit is huge. So I do want to say it's not just about middle housing. I guess I also, if we're talking about, potential rezone, like we could get crazy and keep the zoning R1, but just change what the rules are for the zone and say, oh, now it's R2. but it's still called R1. And do that with everything. I guess, you know, kind of countering a little bit of Dustin, I get Dustin's point, but we hear constantly from developers that not knowing whether it's the infrastructure costs offsite or what, you know, in this case, potentially the benefit they could get like before they're actually well into the development process or into the planning process. It's very hard for them to actually like take that leap and go through it and potentially get bought, you know, like 9 months later, it's like, well, this actually doesn't pencil anymore. You've wasted all this time and money. So I'm a little leery, as much as I like the control of it. I'm leery of having it be this, you know, we're going one by one. If we actually want to get units out there, we need to have some broad-based programs, whether it's the rezone, whether it's the funding models, like, you know, we've been working with Will and some other ones to get some of these things we want out there, like having the game plan that it sounds like maybe Ben has been developing for the last decade of here's the actual programs and projects you can count on that if you're going to build the housing type we want, whatever it is, you can say, oh, my offsite costs are probably going to be in this band and I could probably get this benefit and I could probably apply for this thing. Feels like we'd actually start to get momentum and get people coming here with a game plan instead of the thing, which I know, you know, is nice and we get the full control over of, okay, we'll talk to you for the next 2 years and figure out your particular project on your site. So I'd like us to get to that point.
Ben, and then Travis.
Just wanted to say, speaking of affordability, you know, the figures that are shown in exhibit 5 there, is that like, if this kind of housing was built today, is that, you know, I guess I'm asking a little bit where those numbers came from, because I'd say, first of all, good luck getting a new house of any kind in Hood River that's, you know, $500,000 and below. It doesn't exist. A city lot going rate at what I see is like, you know, which is 1/8 of an acre. This is $425,000. So, you know, looking at these prices here, that, you know, doesn't really give me a lot of hope in terms of, you know, affordability, which is ultimately what we want, because that's still not affordable for the average person. It's not for me.
Travis, and then we're gonna do a lightning round around the table and we'll be out of here, so.
All right. The high density middle housing that's attached, does that also include condominiums? Or is that more like townhouse rows?
Yeah, more like townhouse. Condos are hard. It's the short version. I'll tell you more about it if you want, but condos are hard. Deck is hard.
I think I know partly what you're talking about. So that was my question. But you do solve your values are subdued on apartments because you're renting to service workers and younger people, right? I understand that. But with condos, you're getting the same density, but you're getting ownership and appreciation and the benefit of that. So, but I realize condominiums and homeowners associations and all those are a complete pain in the ass. So
a lot of developers are not willing to build condos because of construction defect liability issues. Yeah. And I have seen in the Portland market, smaller condo projects have happened and have moved forward. So it's not an absolute no. And it could be something that would, you might see a few little things in Hood River. I can see that happening. But it is, there are some developers that have found ways to kind of make it work, and they're mostly working in Portland right now. And there are others that are like, I will never do that again. It doesn't matter how much money it would make me.
What about the ADU thing that's going on in Portland? Do you guys, have you talked much about that? Sorry, 2 questions.
Pull this to a close.
Stole it.
I really like that we did this. I really like that we're finally sitting down with the you guys who do such good work, and it does get to council and stuff, but the feedback path has been odd. So thanks for your continued efforts as the advisory committee. I want to just do a really quick around the table. Does anyone have any urban renewal comments that they want to make? And let's start with Zoom, Travis, and then Heather.
Nope, I made them all. Thanks.
Okay, Heather?
Hi. I don't know. I'm taking in everything that I'm hearing, and I did like what Travis said about that you can make the higher density, like cottage style, really neat with playgrounds and the nice aesthetics. And that's something I worry about with high density projects is that not fitting the nice aesthetic that we have over on the west side. And I guess I just hope that it would be responsibly built. And I don't know, I just reading through it, I did see there's a lot of things to work through.
Cool, thanks. Oh, no, Jack.
I would hate for the projections of building going down to negate Wine Country, Sherman Street Extension, or the roundabout there. I would hate for us to delay those projects because I feel like those projects need to take place for future development. And maybe we strategize what we do as far as the developments, but those three over there, I think, are paramount.
Took the words right out of my mouth, but I'll say thanks for the group meeting too, because it's really beneficial. Great.
Yeah, I agree. And I agree with Heather. I'm just kind of like absorbing a lot of this and yeah, but thinking about the zoning is really interesting to me because I haven't explored that very much, so.
Just want to say thank you to Will and Becky for the presentation.
Yeah, good job.
Absolutely.
Agree with that. And then, yeah, I think it's continue to be aggressive on finding outside sources of money. You know, a lot of this, I think, always comes down to what can we bring to the table?
Good.
Thank you so much. We just focus on the main things that open up development on that side, like roundabout and whatnot, and concur with that, doing that, but not necessarily doing too much, because if we raise a ton of money and slam everything in, all the streets and everything, a consequence of that will just be inflating the asset value of the underlying land, and we'll come to the same conclusion mentioned in that the people that own that land now will just have free asset evaluation. Overall, if you want to reduce your land costs, talk to your legislatures about measures 5 and 50.
Gladys.
I will remain hopeful regardless of this information that we can do this. Yeah, we need more housing. We continue to have folks that are being displaced, and that's really unfortunate. And yeah, go team. Let's get some more housing.
Thanks, Liz.
Yeah, Gladys took the words right out of my mouth. I consider myself a tragic optimist, still able to find hope. Especially, I think you have to be that way as an more affordable housing advocate in Hood River. And even after meeting with what seems like depressing statistics, I still think that it seems like all of the people involved are on a trajectory to figure this out. And I think that we can do it. It'll be hard, but I think I still feel hopeful.
Team Pollyanna.
Yeah.
I have a quick question for Becky, if I could.
Sure.
Do you have any examples of they did it right? A town somewhere that's an island like we are? Or that
I mean, nobody is quite like Hood River, but I do think, I've worked a lot with the city of Bend. They have been working on their affordable housing program for a long time. They are also a place that is very appealing to a lot of people to live. And so I think there are one or two similar market dynamics there. And they definitely have more staff, a bigger land base, and different, not all the same issues, but I do think there's a lot to learn from the affordable housing programs that they operate and the different incentives that they have.
Will, is there anything else?
No, just thank you for everyone's time. I hope this was good context, good background info. I know we're all kind of jumping to what should we do and what knob should we turn. That is coming. That's next, is now having this give us ballpark estimates of what the gap is. This, next up in the 5-year action planning process is prioritizing those investments and getting these programs dialed in. So thank you.
Cool. The meeting is adjourned.
Thanks, Bill.
That was great. Thank you. I can't.
Thanks y'all for that. Thanks Kenny for sitting tight through that. We're gonna take a break after we let you present. So if we could, we're gonna resume with McCack and Kenny Lapointe.
Thanks, there. It's gonna come up with me, I hope. Good evening, Mayor Blackburn, members of the council. I'm Kenny Lapointe, Executive Director of Mid-Columbia Community Action Council, community action agency serving Hood River, Wasco, and Sherman counties. Great to be here with you this evening. I think you have materials in your packet. I wanted to give you an update on the 2024 point in time homeless count. To give you a little reminder of what the point in time count is, the point in time count is a federally mandated count of all persons experiencing homelessness that takes place annually across the entire country. So we're mandated to do that count during the month of January, during a week that sort of is pre-selected. Why January? I do not know. I've mentioned this before. I've also mentioned that it's the Department of Housing and Urban Development, not rural development. So knowing what goes on in rural communities is kind of lacking sometimes. But that being said, since 2020, we have made it a big point to make sure that we're doing the count as best as possible each year so that we can get a good year-over-year comparison of those experiencing houselessness in our 3-county area. Additionally, we collaborate with WAGAP on the other side of the river, Washington Gorge Action Programs. So we're doing a count that includes that side because we recognize that the clients that are being served in the Columbia Gorge region do not realize boundaries that may exist across county lines, across state lines. They're just where they are seeking services or where housing is affordable, as you have just had the discussion that you've had, which I found very interesting. And I used to serve on the City of Bend Affordable Housing Committee, who made recommendations to the City of Bend back in 2014 on how they could increase housing affordability in the city. So I have a lot of background in that work. So that's the overview on what the point in time count is. Again, I mentioned that we've done a pretty consistent job year over year since 2020. Our staffing size on the housing side of things has increased pretty significantly. When I started in November of 2020, we had 8 staff at our agency, one of those who worked on housing. Today, we have 40 staff and about 16 of those are working on the housing side of things at a minimum. Wow. We also collaborate with community partners to conduct the count, recognizing that we may not reach everyone who's experiencing houselessness. We have culturally specific organizations like Inchiwana Housing, the Next Door, the Oregon Human Development Corporation. We have partners in the healthcare world, One Community Health, Mid-Columbia Center for Living, who also have a reach into the world that we're working in. And so we collaborate with them to get the count done. So we do feel good about the numbers year over year. They've actually been pretty consistent in the same sort of range. But one thing that you will notice in the 2024 point in time count, which we actually also saw the prior year, is that we saw a decrease in homelessness in our service territory. While that decrease wasn't huge, it does lend to the work that we've been doing to ensure that folks are getting out of homelessness into stable housing. In 2023, our annual report, which we're going to be releasing here pretty soon, shows that we had 149 people move out of homelessness into permanent housing during that 2023 period. 57 of those folks were from Hood River County. So 57 folks moved into permanent housing. You'll notice that the overall number in Hood River dropped pretty significantly. It went from 111 to 55. I'll try to explain that without making stuff up. So part of that is what I just mentioned. We had a lot of folks who moved into permanent housing from Hood River County, the 57 folks I mentioned. I believe a lot of those folks actually relocated to other areas in the region because housing affordability was lacking in Hood River, as you just sort of alluded to in your conversation previously. Rents have gone up because housing supply is low, making it difficult for lower income folks to stay in this community. We also had a number of folks in 2023 that we had housed with COVID-19 dollars in Cascade Locks. Those resources are no longer available. We actually moved a lot of those folks into permanent housing into other areas of the region. So folks moved out of Hood River County. So they may
They may not be showing up in Hood River County's numbers, but they may be showing up in Wasco County's numbers as an increase. So that's one thing that you might notice. The other thing I'll emphasize is that while we have done good work to reduce the overall homeless count numbers, we've also done a lot of work to stabilize people in housing so that they don't enter into homelessness, because we do have influxes of folks who may lose their housing, may have lost their job, maybe their landlord decided to move back into the home that they've been renting. But we have done a lot of work around eviction prevention and rapid rehousing. So rapid rehousing is really the work that we do to get people into permanent housing out of the shelter system or out of homelessness. And then eviction prevention is the work we do to keep people in the existing housing that they are in, recognizing that it will cost a lot of money. It'll be a toll on the family if they experience homelessness. If they have kids may have to change schools, and we know that sets kids back in their education. So we don't want to see that. The other thing that I'm going to mention here is the annex. So the annex has had a significant impact on homelessness in the region. And last time we did an assessment of the number of folks living in the annex that were from Hood River County area. It was between 30-35%. So it's a rough estimate right now, but we're seeing those numbers in the annex. So roughly 30-35%. We don't have a year-round sheltering option in Hood River at this point in time. We need one.
We do.
We have actively been in discussion. Abigail has been participating. The county has been participating in active discussions to try and help us locate a site that we could purchase in Hood River. We have run into brick walls on multiple occasions in doing so. And I will not get into the reasons why or what has exactly happened, but it hasn't been a great experience from my end of things as we've tried to find places. So we are actively trying to identify a location. We do run the seasonal shelter here in Hood River, which we're planning to open on November 18th of this year. We've been doing some volunteer trainings and stuff like that to get ready for this winter season. But right now the site that we're on is a site that we lease from a landowner. So we don't have permanent ability to stay on that site long term. And the agreement basically is that we only operate during the winter season. So haven't been able to convert that to year round. We want to run a year-round shelter or year-round transitional shelter here because it is needed in order to effectively stabilize people so we can get them into permanent housing. When we bring folks in and then have to release them into houselessness at the end of the winter season, that does no one any good. And so the numbers that you see here, keep in mind the point in time count was conducted in January during the middle of shelter season. Come the end of March, when we close that shelter, this number goes up again. So that's not reflected in these numbers here. So another reason why the point in time count numbers may show lower numbers in Hood River County than they actually were come March 31st of the year. So the other thing I want to mention is that folks experiencing houselessness, what we're seeing, you have two different sort of definitions. You have unsheltered and sheltered. You may say to yourself, well, they're homeless, right? Well, there's a difference between the two. So somebody experiencing sheltered homelessness is in our shelter system. So they're staying in the annex, they're staying in the Hood River shelter. I think the number for Hood River that was sheltered is 26. Coincidentally, that's the number of beds we have at the Hood River shelter site. Unsheltered houselessness is folks who are literally living outside on the street. So they're in a tent, they're in a car, something not meant for permanent human habitation. So that's the difference between the two, and we do a count of both of those populations each year. The other thing is the overlap with mental illness, substance use disorder with the unsheltered population is pretty significant. So a lot of folks who have mental illness and substance use disorder, or both of them combined, or one of them, a lot of those folks we refer to as service resistant in many cases. So they might be unwilling to come into our shelter system because of the rules that we have in place to protect the community at large. So what we have seen is that a lot of folks who remain unsheltered are still unsheltered and have those co-occurring or single substance use or mental health conditions that occur. So we have, I think as many of you know, completed the development of the Gloria Center, Multi-Service Navigation Center, and severe weather shelter in the Dalles. That site originally was going to serve as a year-round shelter, but then we bought the Oregon Motor Motel and converted it into the annex, and we moved all of our folks from our prior shelter over to that site. We decided at that point in time that we would take the Gloria Center and make it an emergency severe weather shelter, which was a significant need that would allow us to house folks who were unsheltered, might be experiencing a substance use or mental health disorder. It would allow them to at least keep them safe for those nights that there was severe weather that existed, or even during the summertime when there was a heat event or a wildfire, which we did operationalize the Gloria Center shelter multiple times this last summertime for heat events. We also worked with the Red Cross to mobilize it during wildfire. So those are a few different highlights. The other thing I want to highlight is everybody, I mentioned that we moved folks from our shelter in the Dalles, our Powell shelter site in the Dalles, to the annex when we opened that up. As of a few weeks back, every single person that made that transition over to the annex has now been permanently housed. So, and honestly, there were some folks that were in the shelter system that I didn't know were ever going to be able to get on and move into permanent housing. But thanks to great partnerships with the community partners that I've mentioned already, as well as the work of our housing stabilization team to get people into permanent housing, we've been able to get folks into a successful living situation. And we do have a retention team that makes sure to check in with people. So we're able to prevent them from entering homelessness again. So we're constantly following up with folks. The other thing I'll mention is we're doing a lot of work to emphasize youth. We have the annex has two sides of it, as the family shelter side. So we've had a lot of kids who've come through at the annex, which has been great. It's also been a game changer for the community to see that the folks that they thought in their heads were experiencing homelessness were not the only folks experiencing houselessness. A lot of families with children, I think at one point in time, we had 30 kids who were living at the annex on the family side. So it's been a game changer for the community. A lot of folks who oppose the project now drive by and say, I didn't know that that was going to be happening there. And they've come by and said, thank you so much for doing this. And I can tell you that from the opposition we received, I personally received in February of 2023 to now is nothing. There's no opposition now. Folks would be upset if we left because there has been a significant decrease in unsheltered homelessness in the Dalles because of the work at the annex. Anything else I should hit on? Okay. I will just say that many of you have heard this from me, but I always feel like it's my soapbox that I need to stay on, is that the reason that we do well as an agency, I mentioned partnerships, really important, but it's because our staff understand from lived experience what it's like to be houseless. And they understand it from their heart. They don't come at it from their mind perspective. They don't know how to, like, filling out the paperwork is part of the job. That's not what changes people's lives. What changes people's lives is somebody caring about them in very difficult situations. And our team understands what it's like to be in those difficult situations and can empathize with people and put hope into them that they may have never experienced before in their lives. And that's why we've had a lot of success. We need as much flexibility as possible in doing our work to pour our hearts into people, because we get distracted by all these other bureaucratic things that come into play, and it prevents us from being able to do that really, really great work that is the life-changing work that makes a difference in people. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions, and we also want to pitch an upcoming event that we have.
Amazing. 8 to 40, amazing. 111 to 55, amazing. Thanks for the incredible transformative work you're doing here. Who's got something? Go ahead, Ben.
Excuse me. First of all, I just want to say I appreciate the work that you guys do, and my partner's the executive director at WAGAP, so I definitely appreciate this kind of work immensely. I know you said you didn't want to get into it, but me being new on council, I either here or some other time would love to know the roadblocks that you've encountered in trying to get a permanent shelter here, because if it's something that we can help with or whatever, I'd sure like to do that. So, I'd love to know more about what's happening. So,
Yeah.
if you don't feel like talking about it now, or, we're short on time, that's fine. But I just wanted to put that out there because, I'd like to know. So,
Thank you.
yeah.
We love working with Jennifer. She's wonderful to work. We love the partnership with WAGAP. Like I said, it means a lot for us to partner across the river because it's what matters to clients at the end of the day. We've just received opposition, right? Like folks don't want this in their backyard. That is reflected in how people have interacted with us. So I'm very hesitant, cautious in how I talk about what we're doing, because I worry just about what's going to happen as we try and acquire property. We've tried to purchase over, above what above the offers that were accepted by sellers. We've offered more. We've offered all cash. We've offered quick close. We've done everything that is possible to get something done, and we've just it's interesting, right? Because we've been met with opposition, even though we have cash in hand, and are not really haggling over price, right? So that's been pretty difficult. So trying to overcome that, I believe we will. I think when it comes down to it, our community needs to assert the values and assert the future that they hope to see in Hood River. What is it that they hope to see? Do they hope to see opportunity? Do people realize that houselessness for many is just one loss away, whether it's a loss of a family member, a loss of health, a loss of income, any of those types of things? I think people don't think it can happen to them, and then lack empathy when it comes down to it. And we need to really think about what we want to see in this world and realize that we have the ability to create what we want to see. And that's what we need help with.
And it's not a new challenge. I believe this will be the 15th winter of the Hood River Warming Shelter. It's taken different forms, as many of you know, and this is the second winter that MCAC is operating the shelter as our program. But in that 15-year history, the Hood River Shelter has never had a permanent location. So, and I think when we think about the future, we don't want to operate shelter long-term. We see this as a short to mid-term needed intervention and support. And then whatever our shelter is can become something different for the community for the long term. We don't see shelter as a long-term solution. So we would love to partner with anyone who may be listening in on Zoom, who may have a property, who would like to hear more about what we've been able to do at the annex, and perhaps come visit us there and see what our programs look like in action.
Yeah, folks should definitely come visit. We're happy to schedule a tour. I know many of you have already visited the annex and the Gloria Center. Again, folks didn't know what was going to come, and I get it. They were afraid because they didn't know what was going to happen in the community, what we were going to build. And I take a lot of pride in the projects that we're a part of, and want to make sure our mission is to build a better future for our community. And I hold that really close to my heart. And it's not just for our project itself, it's for the surrounding neighborhood. We want to make sure that it's safe, that it looks good. We want to make sure that those kids who are staying at the annex, that's their only time experiencing homelessness in their life, and they get out of there and they're stably housed, and maybe they can recall one day that they stayed at that place called the annex and it changed their life.
Good, thank you. Thank you for being here. Been following all the progress of the annex, and it's just tremendous. Like Councilor Mitchell and like the rest of council here, really struggle with why can't we get a permanent shelter here in Hood River. As we think towards our work plan that we will be meeting on real soon in December, Abigail, this is probably a question for you. You don't have to answer this, but what I'd like for staff to think about what is an action for council in terms of prioritization can we do to help move that needle? The answer may be nothing, but if there's anything that could be a recommendation from staff about council goals, priorities, et cetera, for us to set, I think we'd see a lot of support up here. But it is hard to know what to do because there are so many impediments that are out there in the free market, et cetera, for acquiring land. But if there's anything we can do, staff, please let us know. And thank you for the work you do.
Thank you.
And I will be sending an email over to Abigail in response to her email to me today asking about priorities that we have. And we're going to be releasing a new strategic plan in 2025. And I can tell you right now that there's 2 real estate projects that are going to be in that plan. One of them's an affordable housing project that we own in the Dalles that we need to do a renovation on. And the other one is establishing a permanent site in Hood River.
Here.
Thank you for being here. I think every time you've come, I've gone, wow, it's amazing what you've accomplished in the last year, and it is true again. I love all the work you're doing. It's incredibly important for the community. Really glad to hear there has been great partnerships with Abigail and city staff. Gonna echo other folks of, you know, I know we provide some funding and I know we've got staff working with you, but if there's things council can do, if there's other things that, you know, some other funding can help with, obviously the work you're doing is super critical for ensuring residents in our community, you know, are safe and live through the winter even. And yeah, you know, it's a lot harder to, I think, especially in a public meeting, say, oh, what can we do to publicly pressure some private landowner to do whatever, but you know, obviously it's a critical goal and it's something I think this whole council would like to see accomplished as well. So please communicate if and when we can help. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think if we do acquire a site, we have the pallet shelters that we can move over, but that longer term, we need something more stable than those pallet shelter units. Those are meant for emergency situations, really. They're not meant for year-round habitation. So I've mentioned this in the work group that has been trying to identify a location in Hood River, that there may be some advocacy needs with the Oregon legislature or even federal advocacy to bring in some resources for us to develop a site out. And again, as Sarah mentioned, our goal is permanent placement, long-term and a permanent housing. So we would envision doing permanent housing development on a site that we're able to acquire in the long run. So we don't want to run shelter forever. The goal is to end our need for shelter.
And the work that you talked about earlier tonight that you're engaged in is also critical to this, to expanding affordable housing options and focusing on those rental and low income options. Thank you for doing that.
Thank you both for your leadership. I really appreciate everything that you do. I appreciate the staff, and just like Kenny was mentioning earlier, the amount of love that goes into this work. If any of you have an opportunity to watch any of the YouTube videos, or maybe Kenny, you can share a couple of them so that staff can see them. Anyone can be houseless, and it's incredible to hear the stories of individuals who are in a really tough place, found that individual that coordinated their care and coordinated all the access to resources, and now they are empowered and they are permanently housed and they smile bigger and brighter. I'm just really grateful to be a part of this work with you all as well, in addition to my peers. If we can continue to donate or give more money, I know that we only give $23,000 a year and you're supporting a lot of our constituents. Please let us know. I know that you're also in conversations consistently with Abigail around looking for a permanent site here in Hood River. Please let us know how we can continue helping.
Thank you.
Anything else, y'all, for these good people? Thanks again for coming. We're gonna take a break.
We do have an event we want to highlight.
I didn't mean to cut off the event.
November 13th and 14th, we have our 3rd annual Housing Stabilization Summit. That's the Civic Center.
Yes.
In the Dalles. So Gladys mentioned, you know, you're just like this one step away from potentially experiencing homelessness. We're actually going to be doing a poverty simulation, which is a great way to, you know, kind of put yourself in the shoes of somebody and what they go through trying to apply for all the different programs and traveling all over the place. So I think I sent an invite out. We'll resend an invite out to the council. So if you can attend on the 13th, that would be a great day to attend. We'd be happy to have you the whole time. But yeah, if you can make that event, this will be our 3rd one, and it's been very well attended the last few years. So
Thanks again.
Thank you for having us.
We're gonna take a 5-minute break. I know it looks like we're almost done, but we have 3 executive sessions, so just saying. All right, first up, we have the consent agenda. We do have a late breaking addition to the consent agenda. There was an additional liquor commission thing. Did everybody get a chance to see that? So as has been our convention, we will not add that to the consent agenda, but I would entertain a motion for the rest of the consent agenda.
I would move we approve the consent agenda.
Moved by Saunders,
Second.
second by Stupina. Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Yes.
Opposed? Chair votes aye, motion passes. Now for the additional liquor commission one, I guess I would entertain a motion.
I would move we approve the OLCC license.
Moved by Saunders,
Second.
second by Horst Mitchell. Discussion. Gladys, would you like to say something?
Yeah, I'm going to abstain from the OLCC permit applications. We don't have enough transportation here. This is not reflective of the establishment or the owners. We just don't have enough transportation. If we and our county-wide partners are able to provide adequate transportation during late evenings and weekends, I will be happy to start approving OLCC applications again.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Yes.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, motion passes. Thank you. Mosier Water.
Thank you, Mayor Blackburn and Council. So the city of Mosier owns and operates municipal water drinking system. They currently provide service to approximately 225 individual customers throughout Mosier. Mosier currently is without a water operator. Jacobs, which ran their system, elected not to renew both their water and their wastewater operations. The recent microwave tower fire created additional stress on the system, including a system disruption in August, which ultimately required the city of Hood River to issue a boil water notice to Mosier water customers as the main communication entity between Mosier and its water customers. Oregon law requires that water suppliers for community water systems have an operator in direct responsible charge. That's considered the DRC. And as a result of Hood River's working knowledge of the water system, Mosier has asked Hood River to serve as the DRC for the water system on a temporary basis. Under the terms of the proposed intergovernmental agreement, the IGA, between Mosier and Hood River, City of Hood River would assume temporary responsibility for water operations, manage the water utility in compliance with all state and federal laws. Under a 6-month agreement, Mosier would compensate Hood River for services performed for a fee of $6,000 a month, which provides for all Hood River personnel and overhead costs related to monthly operations. Any additional system requirements above and beyond those sort of standard monthly operations would be performed on a time and material basis. The scope of work is outlined as Exhibit A to the agreement in the IGA. The commencement of operations for the City of Hood River, by the City of Hood River is subject to the satisfaction of specific actions by the City of Mosier, which is required to mitigate any potential future service disruptions. Required measures by the City of Mosier prior to City of Hood River's operations include the installation of a remote monitoring system, the installation of reliable backup power at the well and booster pump locations, and a plan for permanent backup power, and the assessment and determination of the existing condition of the water utility in good working order by the Hood River Public Works. The existing intergovernmental agreement assumes if satisfaction of those prerequisites is complete, that Hood River would operate the system beginning on November 4th. The agreement is in front of you for review and discussion, and I'm here to take any questions.
Thanks, Chris. I'll just add that I got a call from the mayor of Mosier today, expressing his gratitude for our helping him out in a tight spot. Great.
Thanks for also including support protections in there. Clarifying question under fiscal impact, it has us receiving $6,000 a month for 6 months, but it has Moser paying us $72,000. The math is not
If
happening.
it was over a 12-month period of time, yeah.
Thanks. The correction should be 36 grand, not 72.
Correct.
In those same kind of line item, things there, on a 2.10, it says perform lead service line, inventory verification field work on or before October 16th, 2024.
Yeah, so this initial agreement, so obviously this has been going on for some time. Moser's been without an operator since August. At one point in time, we had talked about commencing emergency operations beginning as early as September 1st, I believe it was. And so this was a part of the original scope of work. I confirmed with Adam that this work has actually been completed, and so we'll remove this line item from the contract.
Thank you.
Megan.
I think two main questions. One, the list of requirements Moser needs to complete before we take over seems fairly extensive. Are they actually going to be ready by November 4th, or is this like it would be 3 months from now?
No, I mean, so these requirements were communicated to Moser. Presumably they've been working on them since August. As far as the remote system operations, I think we were requiring that they execute the contract. They have executed the contract. So installation is pending. So our understanding is that that's been satisfied. We just need to confirm that. On temporary power, again, it is been communicated that that is either in place or will be in place, within the very, very near term. And so we just need to confirm that. And then the plan for permanent power is exactly that. It just needs to be a plan for what their path is to a permanent generator. So all of these should be either in process and or complete. And the lastly is just our investigation or walkthrough of their system to determine the existing conditions. So this should be done by November 4th.
Okay, and you're saying having a plan in place to have remote monitoring satisfies the requirement of having remote monitoring?
Yeah, I mean, per Adam at Public Works, as long as they've executed the contract for what's called the SCADA system, this remote monitoring, and we understand the time frame, then Public Works is okay in the interim period.
Okay, I mean, I guess maybe this is for Adam, but that seems like the actual installation and getting a site functioning can take quite a while and be rather complicated. Are we more comfortable with being blind for the interim, and we're comfortable being the troubleshooter during, figuring out the alarm system and everything?
I think like Chris had mentioned, they've been working on this for like a couple of months now, and we actually had our SCADA guy out. He did the initial assessment on this, and then they were using, they had a couple bids come in. They were using another company to install SCADA at the wastewater treatment plant, and within one or two reservoirs and one of their pump stations, and it may be 100% already completed. It was like not a substantial amount of work at all. They had SCADA in place, it just wasn't remote. So they're basically putting in a device that would send it to an app on your phone. So
okay,
relatively basic in the world of SCADA.
Okay, thank you. Okay, and then I guess my other one's more like a bigger philosophical one potentially, but as I'm reading this, it's a 6-month agreement, and then it goes to, a month to month after that, as far as I can tell, potentially indefinitely. Later in the agreement, it talks about, we can update our fee schedule, July 1, 25, and every July 1st after that. And I'm sure that's just standard language, but I want to help out our neighbor. I get this is an extraordinary circumstance, but I'm really not comfortable with signing the city on to, forever potentially take over the system. I don't think it's, in the best interest of our residents to be sending folks over there and having to manage a completely separate system that does sound like it's got some challenges of its own that are different than ours. And so I'd like to, if we've got, it's a 6 months agreement with a month-to-month extension, up to 6 months after the initial 6 months or something, that feels like a fair trade to say you should be able to find a permanent contractor at that point, but I'd like to have an actual clear end date to this. I mean, if something's, it's still extraordinary circumstances and another one needs to be negotiated, I think that's something the council can really look at, but I don't want to have this just kind of linger forever, and certainly not linger forever without policy review from the governing board. And so maybe that's more a question or comment from you all of thoughts on that.
No, I absolutely agree with that. How we're, well said, want to support our neighbors so that they can get back up on their feet, but there has to be some sort of end date besides month to month afterwards, and that makes me feel a little uncomfortable.
We can add language in the contract, under section 2, the term. Basically just a sentence that would say, something along the lines of the initial term and the extensions and any extensions, shall not exceed 12 months under any circumstances, right? So, it can go 6 month initial term. It can go a month to month up to another 6 months, but in no circumstances would this IGA extend beyond a year. It can also be shorter, right? It can be.
Are we obligated to go month to month? On month 7, we could say nope.
No, actually, so under the existing terms in the contract, there is a 30-day notice.
30 day.
30 day.
Yeah, so we can.
Ongoing at any time.
Yeah, it says in the contract that we can terminate for either party can terminate for any reason.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't see the we're stuck in Vietnam thing.
No, I think the concern is the contract's executed and then never revisited, right? And it just sort of exists as a month to month without coming to council again. And so if that's the concern, then we can have a finite maximum term by which it either needs to be formally extended, right? Or terminated.
Can we somehow write into the motion that, or I don't think we've done something like this before, but is there a way to set, direction to staff to say in a year's time, we're gonna have this on the agenda and revisit it and see how things are going, and at that time, choose to opt out or choose to extend or something like that? That's feasible.
Well,
Sure, you can give us that direction and we can just keep that reminder for ourselves to revisit. But I think in the IGA, you would want firmer language than that. That would, yeah, and I don't know if Dan or Chris have an opinion on that, but.
Well, I suppose either way, it's difficult because,
I hope not to revisit in a year. I hope they have fixed the problems.
Yeah, but let's say they haven't. I mean, at that point, is gonna be on your radar that it's expiring to bring to council, I just don't want this to fall off the radar either way.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure.
So I think I'll just a couple of, so the intention is for this to be a temporary agreement, right? So I think operationally, the idea is hopefully within 6 months, they have identified an alternative operator. If not, sort of that's the idea for the month to month. I think if we do include a hard stop or, sort of at a maximum term that forces us to come back to council, I do have some concerns that this would just sort of not be revisited, so.
Thank you. I'm agreeing with Chris. I think I from my end, I want the hard stop that kind of forces it has to come to this level. And I also think it's that's very clear communication to Mosier as well of we're doing this as a favor. I know it's already been communicated by staff as a temporary, but that really says there is a timeline and you need to figure out another answer. Which I think is important because I could see this just being really easy. Because I think it is a complicated system and I do think they are in a hard place of it's fairly easy to say, okay, well now this is working fine and we'll just kind of continue to linger on this. And I don't think that's where we want our staff and our resources spent long-term. And so I want to just have that clear communication with folks.
I see Dan has come on.
I think you understand the situation, and
the 12-month max is a good idea. We'll bring this back to you in a year, let you know how things are going, because a lot of this is we need to kind of scope the issues too. One question I had is, what is the City of Mosher's status with Oregon Health Authority and Department of Water Resources? And so we'll need to figure that out. We don't want this to be our Vietnam. I think, I think those are good points.
But
Yeah, that was one of my questions. How does the IGA protect us from liability related to pre-existing non-compliance issues with state or federal water quality standards?
Yeah, so that's what that covers. So that if we walk into this and holy smokes, they're out of compliance, well, that provision says that it's not on us.
Correct.
So we're just here to help. We're here from the government. We're here to help.
can't blame us for the old stuff. Other questions on this, y'all?
Just to be clear, that's it's section 6 in the agreement, which is the pre-existing non-compliance.
Great. It's not so much a question as a clarification. Do we know how much time Mosher needs to fix this problem? Have they provided us a timeline?
They have not. And so we've communicated with Mosher currently that this is a temporary agreement, right? So hopefully they've started what requirements they can to get things moving. I did talk to Abigail earlier today, sort of pending feedback from council, and when we do send them the final form of agreement, I think we're also going to sort of have a little bit of sort of advice and or information with regards to what an RFP process might look like for them, so that we can help them with that. So
Yeah, and the only reason I ask is I'm more comfortable with the 30-day termination than Councilor Saunders is, because it's 30 days written, done.
Sure.
And we can have it on our own calendar to revisit it anytime we wish. But if all of us agree that we want a set term, that's my only concern with setting a set term, is without knowing their schedule, what term do we set? So that's all.
Motion time?
I move to authorize the city manager to sign the water operations intergovernmental agreement to provide assistance to the city of Mosher in the operation of the Mosher water utility under the terms provided therein, with an amendment to the motion that has been suggested to have a maximum term of 12 months, 6 months with the agreed language, and then 6 months of time and materials.
Moved by Sapita.
Do I second and then clarify something? I will second.
Second by Saunders. Discussion. Megan?
And I think it's the second 6 months wasn't time and materials, it was just the month-to-month extension. Does that need to,
It's just an extension of month to month, not, okay.
does that need to change anything in the motion, or is that?
So the easiest thing to do is just to fail this motion. and
Fail it.
try again.
Okay.
All opposed? All opposed to this motion? Opposed.
Aye.
Motion fails. Would we like to make a motion?
Please, thank you. Okay, I move to authorize the city manager to sign the water operations intergovernmental agreement to provide assistance to the city of Mosher in the operation of the Mosher water utility under the terms provided therein, with the amendment we discussed tonight to have a 12-month cap, of the 6 months automatic and then a month-to-month extension.
Moved by Saunders.
I will second.
Second
Well
by
done.
Sapita. Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Chair votes aye, motion passes. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Dan.
Thank you.
City Recorder Jen, no. City Manager comments, Abigail.
Yes, I have a number. Thank you, Mayor. My first one is actually an action item request. That is, we heard from the Bridge Authority asking for the city to pen a letter of support for a grant that they are applying for. It's for the U.S. Department of Transportation's Bridge Investment Program. I believe the amount they are seeking is $532 million. This might be the biggest letter of support I've ever penned. So looking for a thumbs up for the mayor to sign this. Great. It is all here ready for you after this session. So thank you for that.
Special pen for that.
Yeah. A couple other things just to be aware. ODOT has begun sending flyers and publicizing the ramp replacements that we'll be doing downtown. So just know that's a bit more public. I don't know that I know a time frame on that, but just to be aware that I think Visit Hood River has been helping to spread that word. As you heard, service line inventories were completed in Mosier. They were also completed here in the city of Hood River. Service lines being those that connect to the house, right? The Oregon Health Authority required us to do a sample and then an inventory. So we finished that well ahead of schedule. And my understanding is we got a gold star from OHA. So my thanks to Public Works, to John Grimm, who was our contracted engineer on this, and to our GIS staffer who just recently left. Jonathan was a big part of this. So appreciation to everybody. I am in conversation with the county, so close to signing a PSU study to look at consent to annex and waivers. So I think I've talked with all of you before, like this is one of the action items that came from our annexation meeting back in June with the county to if we can inventory those waivers we have for consent to annex and map them out on a GIS, we'll have some data about, maybe some possible next steps. So that's in play. As Kenny mentioned today, I have sent a message to agency heads asking if they would, inviting them to send a memo with their priorities and recommendations they have for city council to consider as you make your goal setting for the next 2 years. That was something we talked about last month. So I've got that. And then my next step will be to send that same invitation to local service providers and other nonprofits. So got that coming up. Those are my updates.
Questions on that? Mayor comments? Nothing? Council comments? Ben?
Just continuing with my departmental tours. I've got police on Wednesday and admin on Friday, I believe. So yeah, still continuing with that. That's all for me. Apologize for my voice. I was at the Bills Seahawks game yesterday. So
And who won, Ben?
my team, the Buffalo Bills. Go Bills. Yeah, that's right. Everybody's gonna really hate me now. Sorry, City of Hood River.
Doug?
Thank you.
Should we do committee reports as well?
Sure.
Yeah. So yeah, I'll start with committee report. So Mark and I met with Visit Hood River last week. It's hard to tell, like so much time always. So good discussions with them. We had some discussions around the recent big festivals. It sounded like Harvest Fest was the most attendees it's been in many years. So also there was the move of Hops Fest down to the waterfront, et cetera. They provided a lot of information, data from their system Datafy on tourism numbers and where people are coming from, campaign analysis and what they've been doing, et cetera. So always really good and insightful. Good to collaborate with them. Also talked about some city priorities with them as well. So just getting feedback from them in various areas. Mentioned that we had been discussing TNCs or ride shares to provide some feedback around that. Also, it's been looked for guidance regarding parking as we're starting to talk a little bit more about, potential impacts to parking that we have around the city, Industrial Avenue, 7th, et cetera, those types of areas. One thing they said they would add to a survey is if we decided to do more street closures in the summer, for example, what that might look like for downtown businesses, not suggesting necessarily more First Fridays, Second Fridays, Third Fridays, et cetera. Not that sort of, but more of a walkable downtown sort of feel if we could explore that kind of thing. So yeah, a lot of good collaboration. I missed anything, Mark? You want to add?
No, I think we queued up a bunch of those discussions for the taxi or transportation network companies. They were Of course we need that. So was the informal but uniform response to what we're doing there. So I thought it was good. They also reported out that their focus not being on bringing more tourists here in the summer did not seem to change the success of the hotels in the area. So I think that encourages them to keep focusing on off-season tourism and good behavior during the peak season. So
That's it for me for committee.
I don't have anything.
that was committee. Economic Symposium for MCED is Friday, and a few of us are going. We'll talk carpools tomorrow. And I only have 3 more meetings. Wow.
Oh, gut punch.
I know, it hurts. So, but we'll save any emotion for the last one. And one is on Zoom. So you people only have to put up with me in person 2 more times. So.
Well, I'm grateful that Kenny was here because he gave a great report. Housing Summit, as he mentioned, will take place November 13th and 14th. There was an email in there, so I encourage, if you can make it, please do. Regional Solutions will meet this next month. The Energy Council will meet in December. That's it for me for committee.
All I got for committee reports is an email about the Mitchell Point Tunnel. There's going to be you guys all get that? Never mind. No, there's going to be a opening dedication thing on Saturday, November 16th at 11 a.m. So something.
There would be some future RSV.
Sure.
Oh, it was a save the date thing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a save the date notice. I can forward it to you.
Okay, now I kind of flubbed it. Anything else to report? Council comments, Grant?
I'll let Gladys do our LOC thing.
Okay, thank you. Grant, Abigail, and I attended the League of Oregon Cities. There was a counselor workshop. There was a lot of updates around some of these federal cases. I'm trying to just summarize so that I don't give you a long spiel. My favorite was the Urban Growth Boundary Bend tour, where, as I mentioned earlier, Ben took advantage of 3 very important House bills and a Senate bill. House Bill 4079. It's a pilot program that was aimed to help cities build affordable housing. The program allows for 2 cities to add new housing units on lands currently outside the urban growth boundary without going through the normal urban growth boundary expansion process. This is in partnership with the Land Conservation and Development Commission. There was also House Bill 3318 that required the city of Bend to develop and adopt planning amendments to guide master planning of the Stevens Road tract. I have lots of information to share with you all in email, so I will forward all of that to you. The other session that I attended that I found a lot of joy was the youth councils that exist throughout the state. So the city of Hillsborough, Happy Valley, Lake Oswego, they all involve their youth in this, decision making, and it's important to gather perspectives from all. There was sessions around community engagement. There was also a power outage while we were there, and it was pretty neat to watch. I was in the Women's Caucus meeting, and all the gals just took out their phones, and we continued business as normal, no delay there. There was also the report out from the executive director around LOC and all of the departments, from their communications team to the intergovernmental relations, the legal department, and some of the conferences that are going to be happening within this next year. Next year, it's 100 years for LOC. So they're going to have a conference in October in Portland. What do you think? Yeah? Good? You want to
I think
add
that's
anything
it.
else?
If I may add one comment, I believe Councilor Rivera has now been appointed to the board of the Women's Caucus for LOC. So thank you for representing us.
Thank you. I appreciate Counselor Tita Montero from Seaside, who has, just here's what we talk about, invited me to the meetings, continues to talk to me about them, and I said, yes, I accept. So starting in January, here we go.
Anything else? Megan, either of those, Doug? Ben, did you have anything on the committee or comment? No, we did it.
I forgot to mention, I'm also gonna be on the Sabados con Nubia this Saturday.
Good job. Thank you, buddy. Okay, now we're gonna go for executive session. I'm gonna read my script, okay? The city council will now meet in executive session pursuant to three different things. ORS 192.661H, ORS 192.661E, and ORS 192.661I. Consult with counsel regarding legal rights and duties regards litigation, negotiate real property, and eval of the CEO respectively. Representatives in the news media are allowed to attend, but they are not here, and we're going to turn off the Zoom. So no decision may be made in executive session. The executive session is anticipated to last 40 minutes. At the end of executive session, the city council meeting will be adjourned and no action will be taken. We will now discontinue the live feed and recording. Let me know.